Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. I love this program, I really do. I love engaging with all of my guests because, in my mind, they are the sages of today. These are the people that, through their experience in life, house much wisdom and insight. And so I'm excited to have Laura come today and talk about her journey. Laura, I want you to tell them everything that you've done. And I want to welcome you to Threads of Enlightenment family. And thank you so much for stopping by. Introduce yourself to us.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Laura Patricia Martin. I am the creator and founder of Healing to Happy, which is a luxury brand that helps women that have been through trauma help heal themselves through nutrition, specifically those that are struggling with IBS anxiety. We've gone on to help hundreds of women around the globe. It started out with just IBS and gut stuff, and then transitioned into anxiety. And now they come together and realize how they're so connected. And most of our clients have gone through some type of trauma in their life that set off their nervous system. So we help to regulate that and help make peace with food and life and get back to enjoying the pleasures of things and just keeping it really simple, which I love doing. So.
That's awesome. And I know I'll take you back to the beginning, but I had a revelation a couple of weeks ago, having a conversation with someone that, and you had mentioned, and I'm gonna quiz you about this. I'm gonna see. I saw the correlation between anxiety and the disruption of the system, the gut system within the human being, the human creature, because I noticed it in a relative of mine who worries about certain things, and the gut is always messed up. And so I'm going to have a conversation about you and that. So, okay, let's go back. I want to go back, Laura, before all of this, because I believe that our minds are formed when we are younger, that we are programmed by society, church, mom, dad, all friends, everything outside of ourselves began to program us, and we began to accept some of their opinion of us, and we take those opinion and make it a reality, and we find ourselves in this state of unhappiness, joylessness, whatever you want to call it. But in layman's term, we're just messed up. So, talk to me about some of those formative years. Describe the family life and school and different things like that, and then we'll walk from there.
Yeah, so I grew up and I never felt I belonged, right?
Hmm.
So in my family and my friend groups, all things like that. So really kind of moving from that arena really impacted the way that I related to other people, which is how I found my sense of belonging was through food. So I never had a normal relationship with food because I was either binging it or restricting it to keep myself regulated in a
Hmm.
sense, I guess. And that's actually really common with people with eating disorders. They'll use it as a sense of belonging either to self or to people around them. And I've always been an empath.
Hmm.
Um, I take on everyone's emotions, as we do.
Yeah.
But at that age, there's no communication around. Now it is, right? Like
Hmm.
the generations that are getting raised now, it's more of a mindful parenting, but that was not a thing of my
Yeah.
generation. It
Uh-huh.
was like, stop crying,
Yeah.
like, deal with it. You're
Man
too much
up.
emotions. Like, what's
Hmm.
wrong with you? And it was good intention. It's just like, they didn't know,
Yeah.
you know? And so growing up, it was always like, I don't belong because I have so many emotions, or like, I'm always wrong because I have so many emotions.
Hmm.
And which then I took that out of my body and kind of correlated from there and chose life events. And you're right, like our formative years prior to the age of 7 is a huge sense of our attachment styles, our sense of belonging, our
Hmm.
relationship to self.
Yeah.
It could be impacted by our worthiness levels and things that we choose. And so I had very strict parenting growing up
Hmm.
um, from my mother. And so was taught I'm not to be trusted making my own decisions, because if I
Wow.
make my own decisions, it's going to go wrong. And so
Yeah.
from there, it's like sense of belonging and lack of self-trust.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't go so well for me growing up. I didn't choose the best. Oh my God, no, well, did all that kind of stuff. And so now when I look back in hindsight, it's like, of course, like all of that makes sense. I give love to my younger self because it led me here.
Yeah.
But definitely from the ages, I would say 9 until about 24 was a nice hot mess, I would say.
I think most of us are, some of us are late bloomers. Laura, we go later, like in the 30s. So I'm not going to name any names, but I'm glad you got out at 20 something. That's really good. That's actually when I started all the good stuff and started losing my mind. But yeah, we are. And the thing that I mention to people all the time, that life has a way of trying to grab our attention, to say to us, there is more that I want from you. And we tend to, because of the current state that we were back then, most of us are not living in a state of awareness. So we don't pay attention to those. Very few of us do. Um, but life keeps knocking and trying to tap us on the shoulder through certain incidents, and then one day we find ourselves in this dark place. And I believe, and I always say, anyone listening to this podcast, the dark place is a beautiful place, but it's as painful as heck uh, to get there. And when you're there, Laura, I believe that's when we began to we wake up. When was your awakening? You said your 20s was a mess. um, how bad of a mess, and when did you get that shaking to say, "Wait a minute, wake up"?
Yeah. So my life changed when I was 24 years old,
Mm-hmm.
and I was on my then partner's balcony. We had just had a physical altercation. He was very abusive. He was a drug addict. I was participating in those activities. It wasn't going well.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting on the balcony contemplating taking my life. This is the third time that happened.
Wow.
And in those moments, you have two choices, right? Like you either go about your life doing what you've been doing and you know where that's going to lead you and it's not going to end up well,
Mm-hmm.
or you choose to get off that floor, go get the help that you need,
Mm-hmm.
and put one step in front of the other, even though you know it's going to be hard.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I realized it wasn't that I wanted to die. I just didn't want to live this way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that had been a theme in my life. I had unexpectedly lost my mom at 22, which sent me on this path around. I went to Asia, ended up, running into the life that I had then, because it doesn't matter where you go, your trauma is going to end up with you if you
Yeah.
don't face it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know how at that age to face it. I had been abusing my body since the age of 13. There was sexual assaults, there was, drugs, alcohol, all that kind of stuff. And it just combined, like you said, God, universe, source will always give you people and places to show you where you're not free,
Mm-hmm.
and kept knocking, kept trying to show me up until this moment. And that's what led me into nutrition. The next day, I sat with a friend. I told her everyone knew what was going on in my relationship, but
Mm-hmm.
no one really knew how to talk to me about it.
Yeah.
And so she sat me down. I told her what was going on in my mind. And she's like, well, you have a really, disordered relationship with food. Because at the time, I mean, my way of coping with stress and trauma was being obsessed with food.
Mm-hmm.
So I was over exercising. I was 40 pounds lighter than I am now. I had IBS. I had all these food sensitivities. I had all these things that were wrong with me, hypo and hyperthyroidism. I hadn't had a cycle at that time in 3 years. That went on for about 5 years, this whole thing. And she's like, okay, so like you have a really disordered relationship with food. How would you go learn about it? Like, how would you go on this? Like, go do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went on to study nutrition and become a health coach. But even then, everything I saw was around eliminations and restrictions. And that became an obsession because I still hadn't dealt with my trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I just threw myself into something that was a little bit more healthy. It did get me out of that relationship. It got me into AlAnon. It got me into, doing the 12 steps and all that kind of stuff
Yeah.
for AlAnon. But it was still not a space that I was like, okay, I feel safe enough to explore the wounds of my past. It was just, you need something else that's a little bit healthier than,
Yeah. Yeah.
drugs and an abusive boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And so finally, as I started to go through this transition, it was about when I was, I want to say like almost 27,
Mm-hmm.
was when I was really at a complex. I had hit my numbers in work. I had done all these things. And I was sitting there and I like closed my laptop and I was like, oh, pickles. Like, I still, like, I'm still, that wound in my heart is still there. I got the numbers. I made the money. I was out of the relationship. I had the health. I was doing all these things, but still, because I didn't deal with this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel comfortable in my own presence. Like that lingering feeling of my discomfort in my soul was
Yeah.
still there. And
Wow.
that's what really set me on this whole diving into the wounds of loss and trauma. And just, you got to get yourself off the floor and out the doors and into that. But you do have to ultimately get yourself and regulate your nervous system and be able to feel safe enough to explore what it means to slow down and be in your own presence. And no amount of work or people or love or fitness is going to actually help you heal that. And so I would say the last like 2 years have been monumental
Mm.
in that arena. And
Yeah.
that's why our brand now is more based on trauma recovery and stuff like that, as opposed to just gut health, because really at the root, gut health was just a thing to get my butt off that floor.
Yeah.
At the root, it was dealing with trauma.
Yeah, I always coin this phrase that everyone is traumatized. Every one of us that have hit this planet, we are traumatized because all of our teachers were imperfect in their ways, meaning our parents, our grandparents, society, church. Every institution, every individual is imperfect in their ways, and so all of us will be traumatized because of that. And it takes guts to begin to um, stop being busy. The busyness of living has caused us to hide much of our pain. And you hear it in your story that you became busy. In the busyness of this, your personality, as I'm listening to you, is obsessive in its parts of it, and you become obsessive driven is more of the term I would say, where you become driven, um, and you switch from one place to another and became driven with this and not really looking at that beautiful person in there and that young girl that has been carrying this tremendous burden and weight. And she now wants to have this conversation with you. How did that come about?
Exactly. That's spot on. And when she does speak, because now it's a very open communication, it's
Yeah.
not a scary thing.
Hmm.
At first it is sitting in your thoughts,
Yeah.
figuring out like what is my thought and what's my past programming,
Hmm.
like sitting in therapy. And I remember the moment and she was like, asked me, she's like, well, who is that? Like, I was talking about just like having to push through work and all these kind of things. And she's like, well, whose voice is that? And at first it was like, oh, it's my younger self. And I was like, oh, wait a second. No, like that's my mother's voice. Like
Yeah.
that is things I'm carrying that aren't even mine. Like, do I want to let that go? Yes. Like I'm so ready to reprogram that. And it's
Yeah.
honestly for me, it's understanding the science behind it. Like for me, that's so freeing being like, oh, like 95% of who I am right now is just a cellular memory of who I've been.
Hmm.
And it's majority programmed since the age of prior to 7 years old. I'm like, oh, okay, so that makes sense why my like inner child and all these belief systems. I'm like, okay, but we have
Yeah.
5% critical thinking brain to change that. And so
Yeah.
it's like taking radical responsibility for that.
Hmm.
It's oftentimes when things happen, we sit in victim mentality,
Yes.
and that's what leads us to abusing ourselves and being around people and doing things like that. And it's like, okay, how can I actually take responsibility for my life to create my life with intentionality?
Hmm.
Because we only get one of them. Our
Yeah.
souls, they'll go on and they'll do these kind of things, but we only have one of these things. So
Yes.
how, when I'm 97 years old, do I want to look back and tell the story in hindsight? what does that journey look like? How did I actually overcome these things? What was the conversations I had with myself so that not only can change my life, but my children's and my children's? Like, what is that evolution and growth in my lifetime?
Yeah, this is it's a beautiful place to be. It is one of the most painful place to be. Talk to us about how you learned to start loving this young girl, and as you learn to love yourself, what processes did you take place? I hear you talk about seeking help, and a lot of people don't want to do that, but we all need help. We're in this together. Talk to us about some of the dark places that you had to visit as you have this conversation with yourself and learning to accept yourself and then learning to love that person that you saw and accepting her and realizing the strength that she had. And how did you learn to move and love her from that place?
Great question. Um, Again, it's been an evolution. It started with I went to AlAnon and I got support. And so, for anyone that doesn't know, that's 12-step program for women, or not women, for children or partners of people of alcoholics or addicts. And so I started there. Really, it was just a space because there was no one to talk to that really got
Mm-hmm.
it. Like, you can have friends and they'll be like, leave him, da da da, like all this kind of stuff. And it's like, it's not that simple. Like, I really wish it was, but it's not that
Yeah,
simple of just like get off the floor and leave. It's a long, grueling process that tugs at your soul, and codependency is no joke. And my mom was an addict as well, so it's just all of this reprogramming and attachment
yeah.
styles and things like that. Lots of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the difference. I've been in and out of therapy my whole life, but actually wanting to be there,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a special kind of like motivate, like a different kind of tone when you go to
Yeah,
therapy and you want to be there, not because you think you're broken and someone else is going to fix you, because no one can do that.
yeah.
It's when you're sitting in that chair and you're like, I want you to ask me the questions that make me reflect a little bit deeper. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm open and willing to look at that. I'm not willing for you to diagnose me and give me something. Ask me the questions that I'm not seeing. Like, where's my blind spot? Why do I keep repeating these patterns?
Yeah.
And I switched my mindset away from fault, because I spent a lot of my life not wanting to look at the woman in the mirror. Like, literally, I didn't want to make eye contact with myself, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have respect and things like that, because I thought I was at fault for all the things that had happened, to
Mm-hmm.
the sexual assaults, to the early childhood trauma, to things like that. I thought I was at fault, but really, I'm not. I'm just responsible for how I continue to carry that with me.
Yeah.
And so the reason we don't like to look at things is because we get confused with, I don't want to look at the monster under the bed because then that means it's mine.
Yeah. Yeah.
But really, it's not yours. It just makes sense to the choices that I've made specifically were a trauma response.
Yeah.
I was in survival mode. I'm used to the chaos. That's how I thought normal things were because of how my life was. But that doesn't mean I'm at fault for those things. I'm just responsible that I continue to carry that cycle with me. And so, really going to therapy and breaking that down, understanding it. I'm very much into spirituality, very honest. I have a lot of, like, my personal development comes with my business, masterminds, sisterhood, um, healing the mother wound,
Mm-hmm.
looking into all that stuff and working just on radical forgiveness. And it's still a constant thing I do,
Oh, yeah.
like, I'll have the inner things come out sometimes, and it's just reframing that in my mind of like, is that mine? Is that something programming from my past? Is it something that happened last week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's
Yeah.
going on here? And can we start to shift this pattern to feel a little bit more love for myself? And really, you know, I don't even strive for liking myself every day, because that's, it's not going to be a thing. But do I love myself?
Mm-hmm.
Most days, sure. But the main thing I'm striving for is just neutrality.
Yeah.
Like, it's not good or bad. It's just me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if and days when it's a little bit lower and my depression kicks in or my anxiety or things like that happen, it's like, okay, we don't have to like you today. It's fine. But can we like rest a little bit? Can we honor the cues that your body's giving you? Like, can we do this a little bit? And it's like, yeah, we can lean into that. And it's just getting into communication with yourself. And a
Yes.
lot of us fear it, like,
Yeah.
how you touched on the busyness of life and things like that. Like, we will stay busy just to avoid
Just to
the
avoid it.
silence
Yeah.
and the quiet of our thoughts.
I
Hmm.
find
But
that
it's a place of growth and understanding.
yeah, it's a place of power. I wrote a book many years ago, and I talked about solitude being a place of solitude. And my background is Christianity. I grew up in that, and I refer to that a lot because there's some excellent stories in there. And anytime I read where Jesus did anything, walking on water, feeding 5,000, doing all that thing, he came from a place of solitude. He was there in this garden, or he's somewhere in a mountain, somewhere where he was facing who he was. And as a result of that time spent, he is then able to create miracles. And I think that's what we are. As we spent that time, I believe it is the rewiring of our brain. You talk about the belief system. The belief system is a beautiful thing. It can keep you in bondage. I know people that are 80, 90 years old that are still in bondage because of their belief. They haven't been able to, they don't even know who they are, and how it's a beautiful journey to get on to know who they are. It's painful. And as you said, a lot of people, especially Western civilization mentality, is that we are born to run. um, and when you go to Asia and all those different um, places, they're not born to run. They're more like laid back, and the mentality is a little more laid back. And when you talk to those people, you'd be amazed at some of the wisdom that come out of them. It's just absolutely beautiful. But it's because we program, our culture programs us. And here you are, this young woman deprogramming yourself and beginning to get a chance to smile at yourself again, look at yourself in the mirror, and face yourself this time in your space of neutrality. You have, looking back, you've come to this place, and so here you are. Now, I want to talk to you, Laura, as from that place and from the where you came. How did this young woman now began to pivot and say, I want to be a teacher, I want to coach? How did you start developing the your programs? I mean, here is this young woman just now is going to do this pivot. What took place?
So, oddly enough, the day I kicked out that abusive boyfriend was the day I got my first client.
I'll tell you
In my
something. I'll tell you something about that. I've done so many conversation, and every time someone tells me when they handled a fearful thing, a, a wall that was standing in front of them, when they remove that wall, whatever relationship that is, blessing is right behind. And I believe, Laura, it's always been there. It's just there
Mhm.
waiting for you and I to move the obstacle out of the way, and then it'll show up. I think it's just knocking on the door, saying, "Get them out."
Exactly. And it's funny because now in my life, I see that happening often. It's like pivot this way, and the universe, God's source is like,
Yeah,
hello, we've been waiting. I'm
waiting.
like, okay,
Yeah.
we need to get into this intuition. But yeah, people had seen, like I said, I was a huge partier. Like that's
Hmm.
what I was known for. I was living in Bangkok. It's a big party city. I
Yep.
was I was wearing that crown, that field. Um, but people saw me, even though I was still in this relationship, they saw me pivot
Yeah.
where I had cut out all my friends. I had gotten super healthy, like was sharing it on Instagram, whatever. And so someone asked me, hey, like I see what you're doing. Can I pay you?
Hmm.
And from there it started. From there, I mean, in Bangkok, I was the only gut person that was a foreigner as well. So I got asked to speak at universities and on panels and at hospitals, and to be in these little platforms that would
Hmm.
help to kind of communicate this stuff and help to talk to people about it. Also with mental health, because it wasn't a topic people spoke about. And
Yeah.
I openly talk about my mental health stuff because I know it helps people and it's what helped me. So I have no problem sharing those things. And it all just happened as it does. Like, and just like before we even spoke, how you were talking, how this platform is a conduit of you. That's why I was like, because that's what I always say about healing to happy. I'm like, I'm just a conduit. Like, it saved my life. Like, this little
Yeah.
baby of mine, like, it saved my life. And now it's just like coming up with my programs and things like that. I just sit down and it's like it comes to me that that's just like, this is what needs to be spoken about, and that's it. Just kind of goes, and it's so fluid. And I know a lot of
Hmm.
people don't get that blessing in their business and stuff, and it takes this hard work and grit. And really, like, since I've stopped pushing to try and be something I'm not, and I just
Yes.
be who I am, like, the programs, I create a program a month. Like, it's just so easy for me because
Wow.
I'm connected to the work. I'm always doing the work. I am my best client. I show up for every single module. I am there for every live. Like, I'm there, do all the homework. But yeah, it's helped to change my life. And it feels like it'd be selfish if I didn't speak on the things that I have done to get here and will continue to do to get to that next level, because
Yeah.
I've also realized my work, and like the biggest thing about my work now is it's not about food sensitivities and healing, all that kind of stuff. It's being able to connect with your family, finding
Hmm.
love you actually can receive.
Yeah.
It's having this excitement, this pleasure. And when we have that, specifically for women, when we stop being angry at each other, when we stop trying to compete, when we stop trying to hustle ahead or be angry about certain things from our childhood that we then carry on to our future children, like, when we stop doing that, we create a better world. When
Hmm.
we're just kinder. So it feels so much more than just like, oh, great, like, I have consistent bowel movements. Yay.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, you connect with yourself. You no longer live in fear. And, I see how my life has completely changed. Like, I have a wonderful relationship with my family now. I have a love that is changing the trajectory of love in our family. Like, my health, the things like relationship to money, like, it's so much more than that. And it's completely changed the bitter, angry, violent woman that I once was to now
Yeah.
sitting in this peace where it's like, if more people can have that transition, that's how we change the world at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I believe you are, from listening to you, and this is why I believe people go through the things that they go through. I know it's harsh to say it because you are the best candidate. Why did I say that? Because once you have gone through those testings, those opportunities to create who you are today, who else could be the best ambassador for that? Who else? There is no better ambassador that can speak to those situations that you have personally been through, you have been personally acquainted with. You are very much in tune to how you react, the pain, the joy, all of those things that were encompassed within that situation that you and those situations that you walk through. And at the end of that, I tell them this is the most glorious thing of all of this becoming a better student of yourself is that you are able to become a servant. It is one of the most beautiful things that an individual can do. And here you are